So, like we said, the importance of the transition game is critical. And we know that all phases of the game are linked. So winning the serve pass battle sets you up to have a strong performance in the first ball side out performance. And then if you have strong first ball attacking, that makes transition game easier on you. But there's some things about transition that are worth thinking about. It's a slightly different lens. And transition can be a chaotic area of the game. It's a little less organized, both offensively and defensively. So sometimes if we have a thought process to kind of bring some order to the chaos of transition, that can help train our teams. So that's what I hope to present to you guys here. I'll bring up a few slides here. Let's see if we can get that going. All right.
Yep.
We're looking good there. Okay. So what the model that I like to think about for transition is to view it as a chain. And like all chains, you're as strong as the weakest link. So transition is it's made of three elements. There's dig, create, convert. And so here's what I mean by that. You have to keep the ball off the ground. So that's preventing the other team from scoring directly. But then you have to turn that dig into a set, an opportunity to attack. And ideally a quality set and a quality opportunity. And then you got to convert some of those opportunities. And what we find is that teams have strengths and weaknesses in any or all of those areas. And, we see teams that can dig a lot of balls and struggle to convert, and vice versa. But for me, just having this framework of trying to see where my team's strengths and weaknesses are is a pretty good start. And I want to dive into some of the kind of nuances of each one. Yeah. Okay. So clearly, we cannot do anything in transition if the other team scores directly, and therefore, if we can't, and also if we can't dig a ball, then that means the other team's doing really well inside first ball side out, and then we're getting crushed there. So it all goes together, and we're going to see that digging is important, and especially for the lower the level we are, the more just keeping the ball alive is valuable. And as we get to higher and higher levels, what we do with that dig becomes more and more critical. So this is pretty interactive here. So I want to hopefully the audience can chime in a little here because I got some questions here for everybody here. And the first thing I'd like to turn over to the audience, and probably the easiest rather than unmuting, is to maybe kind of, if anyone will drop in the chat here. So maybe these two first questions are: where have some of your digging targets been? Where do you teach your teams to aim to dig the ball? And do you have the same targets, for example, for a dig versus a free ball? So I don't know if anybody can hop in that chat, maybe drop some of your thoughts on what you're training your team to do. I would love to hear a couple people chime in on those two questions, where your digging targets are, and do you have the same targets for any ball in transition, or do you have different targets, for example, for digging an attack versus free ball? And while some of you guys are typing in there, I'll chime in with some of my thoughts on there. So where the digging target is for me, and this is something probably worth unpacking. Maybe some of you guys already know this, but maybe just worth unpacking a little bit of terminology. Passing and digging are two different things. So a lot of times when we say passing, a lot of times we mean receiving a serve, and digging is digging a spike, hard driven attack. And then you have some other plays in transition that are maybe not quite full digs. Right, the ball's coming over the net in transition, but it's not really a powerful attack. Maybe the other team had to give you a free ball, or maybe it's like a down ball, or maybe they kind of got a swing, but the hitter took a bad approach and they have to kind of just put not a challenging tip, just kind of an easy tip. So we have some variance about how you're going to be able to, what kind of attacks you have. So, hey, we already got somebody chiming in here. Yeah, we have different targets for digging versus free ball. And for me, that's an important thing to consider, because what we're looking at there is degree of difficulty, which relates to margin of error. So that's something that we see with good teams, and hopefully any team that I coach, we're striving for this, is that we understand risk management and we understand where our margin for error is. because we can have the ideal, but the easier the situation is, the closer you can play to your ideal. And the more challenging the situation is, the more that you have to give yourself room for error. So for me, on a digging target, I want to dig the ball high to the 10-foot line in the center of the court. So if the other team is attacking the ball, and that's our most challenging defensive play, the other team's getting up, they got a good set, they're taking a good rip at the ball, or even the other team is tipping the ball, but it's a deliberate tip. So they got a good pass and they got a good set, and the other team, they show the hit and then they drop a challenge tip. We're going to do anything that we can to make sure that we're able to get a swing. So clearly, if you dig the ball over the net or into the net or off the court, it's very, you're not getting a swing on those balls. So we need to keep the ball is the first thing. And a lot of players don't always really differentiate this. So a digging target, just broadly speaking, I like to try to keep that ball 10 feet off the net. And that way we have some variance around that. It doesn't guarantee you're still going to over dig some balls. But if we have that mindset of just keeping the ball up in the center of our court, you're more likely to keep that ball on your side of the net. For a serve-receive ball, especially if it's not maybe the most challenging server, we're probably aiming more like 5 feet off the net, maybe a little closer for a high-level team. Because a serve-receive ball is probably a little easier than a hard dig. But we still want to give ourselves some margin for error there. And then maybe a free ball, we're thinking, hey, can I have a pass that's close to a perfect pass? Free ball, maybe an easy down ball, something like that, where we can expect to, have that ball a little more control. Hey, it's not the end of the world if we put a free ball at 10 feet, but we're potentially handicapping our offense a little bit there. And this is also relates to the skill of our players. So, for example, if I was coaching a 15 and under club team, I'd like if we're a decent 15 and under team, that's usually where we can ask a libero on that team to pass a free ball with good accuracy to make sure that our setter has a chance to have all of our options, including a middle. But if it's might have a player or two on that team that has less ball control, maybe it's an opposite or a middle who is playing some back row, but it's not necessarily a defensive specialist, I might not be urging them to get those free ball passes up close to the net so we can run it quick, because they might just end up putting that ball into the net. And so therefore some of those, so it could be within individual players on the team, some players need to have a little bit more margin for error, give themselves a little more margin for error. And like we might see a 12 and under team, it's okay if everything is passed between 5 and 10 feet off the net. So we keep the ball on our side, because also the smaller setters, less dynamic setters, they're going to have more trouble with tight passes anyway, and passes that are coming into there. So we do see higher level teams look for some more opportunities to take those easier balls and get them up a little closer to the net, get their middle attack involved. So for one of your considerations is understand this concept of margin for error, and then understand what kind of level of the team that you're operating at, and even the individual players within your team, and what sort of margin for error they're capable of operating at. Because the number one thing is we have to keep the ball on our side of the net, not lose the swing because we dig the ball too tight. But then slightly balanced out by the fact that we don't want to be too conservative, and then we're only having the opportunity to set a high ball. Okay, what are the most easily dug type of attacks? This is something that, for me, I had the chance to kind of do some clinics and work a little bit with some club teams in the local area recently. And this is one of the foundations when I'm teaching defense and transition. Because one of the things that we have to understand is the other team is capable of making good plays. Sometimes, hey, they just go up and they hit a good ball, and we got to make our best effort for it. Hey, we're going to dive for it. We're going to do what we can to keep the ball off the floor. But we understand that ball that the other team rips to the back corner, catches the sideline, that might be a tough ball to get up. But we want to know what the type of plays the other team is going to give us as they're going to attack towards us, that we have the most reliable chance to have success. Because that's how you start building your defense. And you have to know where the majority of your transition kills come from. So I'm going to say this for juniors volleyball, for example. Most of your kills in juniors volleyball are going to come off free balls and down balls, tips or off speed shots, and attacks right into the center of the court. So not like right on the end line. Obviously, not balls that are like bounced straight down, but not balls right to the end line or right to the corners, kind of right in the middle of zone 6, somewhere between 18 and 23 feet off the net, or like you could say 7 to 12 feet in from the sideline, kind of right in the center of the court. Um, so teams will have different defensive systems designed to handle these balls. And I'm focusing mostly on the transition, so I don't want to get too side tangent into what defensive system you should play. But for sure, your defensive system needs to account for those 3 types of plays because you're going to get a fair amount of free balls or down balls. And you can reliably, even 13, 14, 15 and under teams can reliably score off those plays. In fact, a lot of times 13 and 14-year-old volleyball is the other team's trying to get good swings until one of them gives the other team a free ball. And then you have a chance to really actually go get a kill. And even for higher level teams, even when we see in the NCAA, teams do not often dig to kill when the other team goes up and bombs the ball right down the line. And they might dig that ball up, but a lot of times they're digging that ball up and just trying to give it back in a challenging way. They may not, they're going to directly kill that ball at a pretty low rate. So for me, I always want to focus on doing what we can. And then maybe your players make some cool plays and try to do some of that other stuff. But I really want to reliably execute on free balls and down balls. I really want to make sure that we're picking up off speed and not just getting those tips and rolls up, but digging them in a way that we can then, as we're going to talk about, create and convert. And then just some of those balls that are kind of medium speed balls into the center of the court. So not the hardest rip and not using all the sidelines and stuff like that, but just medium speed balls into the heart of our court. We want to dig those balls and again, dig them reliably so we have a chance to score. So kind of the last piece is like, all right, make sure that your best defensive players are having a chance to handle those 3 types of situations a lot and make sure that whatever your defensive system is, you have a plan for those type of balls. All right. And a couple things that I like here, going from something that's the most individual to the most kind of team oriented, kind of 3 hallmarks. One is that, for lack of a better term, doing so much defense can bog your practice down a lot. And a lot of teams, 13, 14, 15, 16 and under teams, they can struggle because they get served off the court. So they can't reliably pass and they can't reliably get good swings at a serve receive. So a typical 15 or 16 and under team, if you add up their aces and first ball errors, you're looking at 1 out of every 3, or even as high as 40% of the other team's balls that they serve in the court, they don't even get returned with an attack, with any kind of attack. So it's either a direct dart or a free ball, give it back. So it can be challenging if you just get out and you're just doing nothing but old school digging lines. That's a lot of times where your players are not getting a chance to receive serves, and receiving serve is a different skill than defense. And that's a lot of chance that they're not getting past that hit off serve receive. But what I like to do is I like to try to, if I can, pull some individual players or groups of 2 or 3 off the court if I have a little space off the court and hit a little mini defensive tutoring session while everybody else on the team is doing a lot of pass that hit stuff. This can be a great way also to get your assistant coaches involved. Very typical kind of club or high school volleyball. A lot of times your assistant coach might be a college kid who's hasn't really coached before, but they played in high school, or maybe they play on the college club team or something like that. They're 20, 22, 23. So they may not have necessarily a strong coaching background, but if they have a little bit of a playing background, they have a little bit of a chance they can hit a good hand contact. That's great opportunities for them to be involved, to build relationships with the players and kind of keep the pace of practice going. So that's a really good one. And I might be biased to that because that's how I got my start in coaching. My parents were coaches. And when I was, maybe a sophomore in high school, I was coming in and helping out with the middle school team. Oh yeah, hey, bring some girls, bring some over there, hit some down balls, get them practicing their overhand digging, or help them practice some pancakes, something like that. So again, that's a great way to involve your younger coaches, your assistant coaches, and keep the kind of amplify the flow of practice. And then something that I like is kind of a split court setup. So a lot of teams do this. You kind of imagine like a 2-way hitting what looks like an international hitting lines, that kind of two-way kind of shared hitting. But what sometimes I like to do is every now and then, instead of just attacking into court over there, is put a digger over there. And so it's almost like you're kind of going through a hitting lines type focus. And I like to have it off a received serve or something like that. So you almost kind of have a hitting lines focus, however you do this kind of stuff. But every now and then instead of having an offensive focus, say, hey, our focus over here is we're going to try to put as many balls on that digger as possible. So it's a little less about the attacking, or it's a little bit more about attacking with control, and then giving a defender some opportunities to dig off their teammates. So, and you just kind of put one player over, if you do it two ways, so you got two players at one time, put them over there for about 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes. And then what I also like to do that as a coach is I kind of, I'm also standing right there, because a lot of times your players are not always going to hit with control or hit a diggable ball. And then I kind of stand right there. So if you don't get it from your teammate over the net, which is kind of the ideal way to practice your digging, I'm kind of right there. I'll snap one in. You can dig one off me. Or I also sometimes kind of say, okay, we're going to emphasize our overhand digging. So you're ready, and the dig that you might get off your teammate could be anything. I mean, it could be a tip, it could be a hit right on you, it could be a hit high. You don't really know. Just do your best to make that dig. But then every time I'm going to add an extra ball that's for sure going to be an overhand dig. Or every 3 balls, I'm going to give you one to pancake, so to make sure that just some of these more miscellaneous skills that sometimes the players that don't have the comfort with that skill, they'll never really go for it in the game like setting. So then they never get better at it. But sometimes when I sprinkle those ones in, or you as a coach kind of sprinkle them in throughout the other drills that you're doing, then it almost like sticks it in the player's mind. And then they're more likely to go for it in the more game-like setting, or the more realistic setting of digging off a opponent coming over the net. And then they start getting a little more comfortable with that skill. They start going to it a little bit more. So you kind of have the pure individual stuff off to the side. You kind of have this hybrid where you're modifying your hitting drills every now and then to include a digger. Maybe you as a coach need to sprinkle some in. And then, just kind of more of a team thing. I call it ball setter, ball hitter, because that tends to be our defensive eye work. It's not really about what the drill is called, but kind of the principle of the matter there is kind of like scenario-based defensive training. Because one of the aspects with developing your defense is very random and very chaotic. And it's often, you might not see the same situation on defense for like 3 or 4 more minutes later. So if you've just given some players some feedback, for example, about where to stand on defense or an aspect of their technique, they might try to retain that for 2 or 3 plays, but it's a rare player that's going to keep that in their mind for the next 10 minutes of practice. And then suddenly when that situation happens again. So I like to do some defensive drills that have a little bit of a script to them. So I'm going to toss a ball in and enter it to a player. And there's kind of 2 ways to do it. One's like the script is public, and one way the script is private. So for example, I might say, okay, hey, first ball, and I'm just going to bowl it into the offensive side. And the offensive side is really more of a tool to develop the defensive side. So they also have to understand, hey, this is not necessarily the time that we're working on our offense, even though it's going to be a big part of our practice. But right now, you're more trying to put in the ball that we need to develop our defense. So it might be, hey, okay, here, I'm going to bowl this ball in, but pass it 10 feet off the net, and then we're going to set the ball high to the left side. Because that's a relatively easier to develop our blocking eye work, that we can really expect our defense to be in the exact right positions. We're scripting now. We know it's going to be a high ball to the left. So even though there's a little bit of the ability to kind of just kind of the visual perception of a game, it's taking away a few options. So it's a little simpler. And then therefore we know the ball's going high to the left side. So for sure, we know we can be in our proper defensive stances or something like that. And then, so you have some stuff like that. So, okay, so we'll go 2 balls high to the left, and then the third ball, you can go anywhere, for example. So basically what you're doing is you're kind of just increasing the prevalence of some of these chaotic elements. If you see, it's kind of as similar to what I was talking about with the split court, where we're going to have every other ball, or 2 out of 3 balls are going to be from a teammate that's going to have a lot more randomness to it. And then every other, or 1 out of 3 balls is going to come from me. And that's going to be kind of the practice focus on that aspect. Then the other way you can do some of these defensive kind of scripting is the private code. The script is private. So in this case, I may stand over by the outside hitter and I might say to them, hey, tip this one, tip this one, or hey, try to go deep line on this one. Uh, and what I'm going to try to do is a similar thing where I'm going to try to increase, like, hey, we want to work on our tip defense. And we've talked about what we need to do. And maybe we've identified one or two individual skills, such as the ability to dive for a ball or run through on a ball, something like that. And we get into that game, I might not necessarily say it to the defensive team, but just I'm going to go over to the offensive side and say to them every 2 or every 3 balls, hey, tip this one. Because in practice, they might only tip 1 out of every 7 or 8 or 10. But now if I can get them tipping 1 out of every 3, now our defense is going to just have a lot more chances to respond to that situation, for example. So there's just a couple of suggestions on the defensive side of that chain. Now, a lot of what we're going to talk about is these last 2 elements, the create and the convert. Because I think a lot of times when we talk about defense in transition, we spend a lot of time on the digging element. But here's one thing that I want everybody in this seminar watching this to kind of think about, to eliminate from your vocabulary as a coach. Nice touch. So we hear that all the gyms, right? We go out of the gym, we probably say it all the time. Hey, nice touch, nice touch. What does nice touch mean? It means the other team just scored the point, but we tried hard. And hey, there's a noble sentiment behind it, right? We're trying to encourage our team. Hey, hey, we made a good effort on it, because that's a first step, to playing some defense. But at a certain point, we want players to understand our goal is not to touch the ball on defense. That's probably one of the most unique elements about volleyball defense. I don't know enough about other sports, I guess, but the goal of a defender in volleyball is not just to touch the ball or to stop the other team from scoring immediately. It's to start your own offense, to start your own transition offense. And I really want players to understand that the goal of us playing defense is to kill a ball in transition, to produce a kill for us. And yes, sometimes we just have a ball where it's just a great attack by their team. All we can do is fight to keep the ball alive. And even if we have to give a free ball, okay, we're just trying to scramble and stay in the rally. Okay. But you can't win a lot of matches if you're always just scrambling. At a certain point, your luck is going to run out there. So we have to understand that we need to dig balls, but then we need to turn those into swings in transition. So this is where the idea of a create. We want as many of our digs as possible to become creates, to create transition opportunities. Okay. So here's some more questions. And I'd love to kind of solicit some thoughts. What do you guys think here is, how often does the setter set in transition versus a non-setter? If you had to kind of guess it at your level, if anybody can hazard some guesses on what you think, that's kind of polling the audience to see what you guys think there. So while maybe 1 or 2 of you or all of you, if you want to drop your guess as to that answer, I'll talk about the first thing in terms of what type of digs are most likely to lead to a swing. So some of the stuff that we know is in transition, it's like we talked about a little bit, we have there's less tolerance for tight digs. So some of you in here are running a 6-2 and your setter is always coming out of the back row. And others of you might be running a 5-1 where your setter is at least coming out of the back row half the time. So we can imagine that digging the ball tight is challenging for a setter because they got to come up. So I do not like digging the ball tight at all. I like digging the ball high and off the net. And here's the other thing that we also want to understand about that. When you consistently dig the ball tight, you start training your setters to bolt up to the net because no setter wants to let a ball drop. So if the last 4 digs have all been close to the net, now that setter is going to start breaking for the net real early. So 1 of 2 things happen. This is where setters get that reputation for being bad defenders. So sometimes coaches, setters don't play any defense and this, that. Well, it's because everybody else is digging the ball so tight, they feel like they have to start bolting to the net before the hitters even hit the ball. And then also what you don't want to have happen is you have a couple tight digs. Now your setters are starting bolting to the net. Now your defense corrects and they dig the ball off the net. but your setter's starting to bolt to the net, and now they're running back off the net, and then they have that stumbling bump set that doesn't get controlled at all. So what I really like is when we train our teams to keep the ball high and off the net, especially if it's a challenging dig. A free ball, maybe the setter starts, obviously free ball setter starts releasing up there a little bit. But if we kind of train that, setters don't bolt to the net, be prepared for a dig that is off the net, and defenders dig the ball off the net. Now we get this really nice thing where setters are able to operate really well in transition. And we had a great comment. That's my favorite answer to that question. There you go. How often does the setter set in transition? Not enough. Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. Hey, there's a lot of matches where it can be as high as 1 out of every 3 balls, but a more common would be about 1 out of every 5 have to be set by a non-setter. That's a lot of balls. A lot of balls have to be set by a non-setter, and you want to have a plan for it. And in my opinion, just asking your setter to run faster is not a good plan. So that's not the plan that I want to rely on. The plan that I want to rely on is to have all of our players be competent setters. So, or should I say, all of your players be able to set a ball. At some point, we start understanding that the ability to play setter and the ability to set a ball are pretty different things. And when we see as players get higher level, I mean, certainly national team level players, but I think even good 17 and 18-year-old players, or even younger than that, everybody on that team can be expected to be able to set a ball just up in the air to the closest hitter to them. That's a realistic expectation, even for high school kids. And when we find that, when we have the capability to do that, it makes our setters better, actually, because setters, they get real, and they don't like to let the ball drop. That's kind of the fundamental thing that every player, when they first start setting, is like, hey, you cannot let the ball drop. You got to get to every ball. You got to do this. You got to do that. And what happens is when they start getting so antsy about getting to a ball that's, 25 feet away from them, because everybody else on the team is just going to clear out. Then what they do is sometimes they start bolting different places, and they're not in a good position to set good digs. They're not in a position to set a perfect dig because they're already sprinting in the backcourt. They're doing that kind of stuff. So what we see is when our non-setters are competent, that actually helps our setters get better. And then the fact is, no matter how much you try to have that setter bolt around and run around the court, your non-setters will need to set balls. And there we go. Do we want to just give all those, that 1 out of every 5 at least, sometimes more, balls in transition that will need to be set by another player? And it's really good if those players can hand set the ball. So we know typically, if we use kind of the hitting efficiency, right, 100, 200, 300, 250 hitting percentages, typically you're looking at about 100 points higher off a hand set than off a bump set. As high as that on some of the studies that I've looked at it, which often is close to a doubling of hitting efficiency. So a typical hitting efficiency in transition for a high school level team is about 100 in transition, 10% efficiency. Something like 35% kill and 25% error is pretty common. 30% kill, 20% error is pretty common for high school level teams. So off a handset, you could be talking about going from hitting 100 to hitting 170. That's a big upgrade. That's like a full kill a game. So we really like when players can hand set. What types of digs are more likely to be dug by a setter versus non-setter? So what we see by that is often setters can have the capability to dig the ball with a lot of control. So what I mean by this is, and actually one of the interesting things about this is sometimes the better the level that you get, actually I don't want to say the easier your setter digs become, but at a certain point of volleyball, the other teams are smart enough to, when they're kind of in a less than ideal attacking situation, what do we do? Okay, at least chop it to the setter. So what that means is actually your setters have lots of opportunities to dig very controlled balls. And maybe it might sound obvious to some of you, but you want to have a good plan for your setter outs. If you run a 5-1, it may need to be a slightly different plan for, or not totally different plan, but it's just slightly different angles of how that dig is going to happen when the setter is digging the ball as a front row player, meaning they're often covering a tip versus when they're a back row player. So just starting with the back row player, obviously we know a lot of those digs are pretty controlled. They're pretty in the center of the court. But often whoever is setting that ball, if it's a back row player, they're going to be facing the right side of the court, which means they either need to be able to set a right side player, which means your right side player needs to be able to hit it, or then they need to be able to back set or set over their shoulder to the outside. So every team is going to have different solutions to those problems. But that's something that I think a lot of coaches don't always think about, just how the players are facing. Now, some teams might use a right front player to be a setter out. Setter in the back row is going to dig a ball, and the right side player in the front row is going to set the ball. This is pretty common for a lot of club teams. If you run a 6-2, sometimes your setters stay in and hit sometimes. And then a lot of times they want to be the setter out ball in the front row. Totally fine. But just now know they're coming off the net and they're facing into the backcourt. So they need to either have a strategy where you're getting a back row attack in transition. Not always the worst thing in the world, generally not as efficient as a front row attack, but then they need to have a plan and they need to have footwork for how they're going to be able to pivot or turn or square back up to set the front row player. And then when, if you do run a 5-1 or a 4-2, where your setter is front row player, a lot of the balls that they're going to dig they're going to be coming forward and they're pretty shallow. So a lot of those digs get pushed way over to the left side of the court in zone 5 and zone 4. And most teams, when you practice your setter out balls, you practice with the setter digging at 1, which means a lot of those digs, they get dug kind of into 6 or maybe 1-6 or that kind of triangle between 1-6 and 2. So if that's all the setter out practice that you do, just when you do drills, okay, we're going to do serve and 2 extra balls, and one of those extra balls is a snap to the setter, like a lot of the drills that you all might do, your different 6-on-6 drills. But then you run a 5-1 in the game, you're going to have a bunch of these setter out digs that are going to be your setters coming across to pick up a tip from the right side player. And then a lot of times, if you just haven't practiced it, your setter out, your setting is not as smooth because it's coming from a different area. And then also the hitters are maybe not used to the set coming in that particular way. So just make sure that you understand what the most, based on your system, where your setters are playing and who is going to be your setter outs, where those digs are likely to be created. So the angles that your setters or your non-setters who have to set are going to be facing. And then also what kind of attacks that those are going to lead. Because again, your goal is not just that your setter digs a ball. Your goal is, hey, I love it that the other team is just going to chop the ball at a 1. Just chop the ball to our setter, because that should become a reliable create in transition. And if you have a good plan for it, you actually will sometimes reliably produce more swings because your setter is going to get a lot of medium balls where the other team's just kind of chopping it over at him or her. Then finally, where's your setting target in transition? So this relates to what we kind of talked about with where the digging target is versus a free ball target. So the more challenging the set is, the more margin for error that setter wants to give. And hitters are generally a little less dynamic in transition when they are coming out of serve receive. They have a lot of forward momentum going towards the net. When they're transitioning, they have to come off and come back on. So they usually don't have as much forward momentum built, a variety of things like that. So basically what that equates to is hitters don't like tight sets in general, but especially sets that are too tight in transition just are errors and blocks waiting to happen. So, and also setting the ball too wide is also really wrecks your hitters in transition. So setters maybe can aim a little more perfect. Now, if it's a free ball in transition, okay, they can aim to kind of make that perfect set. But when it's more of a dig and the hitter is really transitioning, they're under a little bit of a time crunch, missing the ball a little too high, a little too off, a little too in, makes it more likely that you're still going to get a swing and not, the flip side of that is pushing the ball into the antenna, right? Tight and wide. It's a hard ball out of serve receive, and it's an even harder ball off a transition situation. Now let's talk about finishing some of these kills. Oh, sorry. some of the drills to create. Hey, we all like to play queens. We all like to play back row threes. And one of the things that I like, especially as we're getting into the high school levels, is trying to have that set go to the front row. So they're going to play back row defense, but then they're going to hit in the front row. So first of all, one of the nice things about it is, you just got to be a little more dynamic as an attacker. You're going up, you're hitting the ball in the front row, and then because you get front row attacks, it's more challenging balls to dig. So that's a lot of good stuff. But the thing that I like the best about it is you have to set into the front row. So a lot of kids, and this is what I see a lot of times, as they're kind of trying to go from middle school to being like a solid high school player, like JV level high school player, or maybe kind of borderline JV varsity, kind of depending on the level of your area. Is middle school volleyball, kids tend to set at their teammates. This is how we tend to have a catch, right? Like when you have a catch, you throw the ball to your teammate. But when we set the ball, that's like the worst thing that we can do, is set the ball at our teammate. We need to set the ball into space that our teammate can approach into. So sometimes when I see youth teams playing queen of the court, they tend to set the ball at each other. And a lot of that play, and it really cramps the approaches. So when they play queens and you hit out of the front row, that teaches them to set the ball high, because now I got to approach from the front row to the back row. So I'm not looking for a down ball out of the back row. Send the ball high up into the front row where then my teammate can go get it. And one of the things that I love to do is I like to tape down. If you just use that blue painter's tape, that comes off, doesn't leave any marks on the floor or anything like that. I like to tape down about 3 foot by 3 foot square. That's a setting target. So basically where you'd want your hitters to be in when they're attacking the ball. Like when they're in the air, they would be kind of above that square, maybe landing in that square kind of to the front of the square. So you kind of make it about 2 feet off the net, 2 feet in from the sideline, kind of a 3 by 3 foot square there. And kind of what I say is set to the box, get to the box. So a lot of your kids in that kind of 14, 15 age group where they're trying to go from, oh, hey, a down ball's not bad at 12 or 13 and under, but now, hey, we're trying to really get some swings here, is we don't need to worry about finding our teammate in transition. And hitters, you don't need to worry so much about where the setter is. They all want to kind of look at each other and play at each other. Hitters, you're going to take your approach to that setting target. Setters, you set the ball high into that target in transition. And if you both do that, now the hitter's going to have a good chance to swing. But if the hitter is like, if you're kind of always wondering, hey, where's the setter going? And a lot of hitters, they almost kind of take their approach at the whoever's setting the ball instead of to the target. So that back row threes, but with a front row attack, especially if you can tape out the box, get to the box, set to the box, that starts kind of getting you on the board about this creating opportunity, creating those nice transition sets. What I really like is a fours. So fours in a square. So a lot of times it's when they kind of play this stuff, you play with a front row setter and then kind of 3 people in the back and that kind of queen of the court style, king of the court style. But I really like this kind of fours in a square. So you have a left and a right front, a left and a right back. And then what I like to do is make zone 6 out of bounds. So if you play on a court that's like a basketball court, a lot of times it's like, combination basketball, volleyball court. A lot of times like that sort of foul line key, it almost kind of marks off your zone 6. So that's great. Hey, the basketball key is out of bounds. And if you don't have that, and you put the blue painter's tape down, that's great. Just the middle third of the court and make that out of bounds. And if you don't have the ability to do that, they just say, hey, coach, I'm going to judge. If it's kind of to the center of the court, it's out of bounds. But it's nice to be put tape down because especially when players get a little competitive, it's nice to have that delineated. So one of the things I like about this is, hey, we're going to give less of those balls. Maybe we said that's one of the easiest transition opportunities is those kind of medium speed balls into the center of the court, right to the heart of zone 6. So now that's out of bounds. So as a hitter, now we're working on not hitting that ball there. And we know as a transition hitter, we might not always get our biggest swing. So if we're not going to be able to get our full power, if we're only getting an 80% swing, because sometimes that happens in transition, it's not our best approach. We're trying to find the set, this and that. Well, if we're going to go 80%, we got to go 80% towards one of the two corners and not right into zone 6. So that's what I like about playing that left and right front, left and right back. And I like a progression where I go just dig set. So you can have coaches just kind of snap in some balls. And it's less about the defense. So the one thing that I don't like to do is sometimes I see coaches doing something like this, and it becomes a digging off the coach drill. But I like because you can do it two sides. So you can have 4 players on one side, 4 players on the other side, and a coach is snapping in on both sides. So you have 2 coaches, but it's really not about the defense. It's about the setting chance. So when you can go pretty quick, snap a ball in, step in and set, snap a ball in, step in and set. So you get a lot of setting opportunities. So I think that's the best way to kind of run just the dig set stuff. And then, okay, you take one group of 4 off, and I just got 4 on, and I just go dig set hit. So coach hit a ball in, and I like it. Hey, you hit it to one back row player, the other back row player steps in and sets. So if you hit the left back, right back steps in and sets. If you hit it at the right back, left back steps in and sets. And the first fundamental is just set where you're facing. So right back digs it, left back steps in and sets to the right side hitter. And if left back digs it, right back steps in, sets to the left side hitter. So that's the easiest way. Just set where you're facing, nice and easy. Hitters start working on their transition. And then, depending on your system, if you're running 5-1, you got to have some times where the setter is the front row. And you can add infinite variations to that. But just go for the dig set. You do the dig set hit, and then boom, then we're going 4-on-4. And zone 6 is out of bounds. So that's a really nice one for transition. So that's what I call that 4-ball wash. So you can imagine a transition against the left side hitter, a transition against the right side hitter to both teams. So that would be 4 balls. Left side one way, left side the other way, right side one way, right side the other way. So you can kind of enter it controlled from a player, or a lot of times as a coach, I'm just going to toss it up and snap it in like I'm an outside hitter. Controlled ball, because it's more about the transition than the defense. So 4 balls, 2 each way. And if it's a 2-2 split, then I usually just bounce in a tiebreaker ball. But if you win 3 out of the 4, then you get to stay on. So if you have 12 kids on your team, 3 teams of 4, and you just cycle through a bunch of these, so that going from dig set to dig set hit to then the 4-ball wash competitive is a really nice, that's like a solid hour phase where you're really able to emphasize the ability not just to get a ball up in transition, but to take a good transition approach and to set a hittable ball in transition. So that's one of my favorite practice formats, really for any age. All right, and now let's hit that convert aspect. Okay, we got a swing. We're going to kill it. Yeah, definitely some of these guys can kill it. So we love our team to be able to hit like those guys. So best opportunities to score. We talked about this. Free balls and down balls. We're expecting to get quality plays and turn them into chances to score. And if you're coaching 12 or 13 and under, they may really be your only opportunities to score. And it may be if the other team gets a good hit, you're just hoping to get it up and get the ball back over the net in any fashion. And maybe we can make it a tougher free ball than an easy free ball, but you might not be expecting to necessarily dig a hard hit and turn it into a transition kill at 12 or 13. They may not have the capability, but hey, if we can do it off a free ball, down ball, okay, that's when we start building. Then we start looking for the other teams, playing some readable tips and rolls. Because again, even if 13, 14, even 15 and under, most kids are not tipping a good set on a good approach. Okay, we're 15 and under. We don't get that many good approaches and perfect sets in the game. That's their chance to go up and whale the ball. So they're going to tip and roll in more obvious fashions. So we identify that, and those start becoming opportunities to score. We don't just get those tips up. We dig them high. We have a chance to really set with control. Those balls that we pick up tips and rolls, the digs usually don't have a ton of energy on them. You can imagine a player goes up and hits their hardest ball. It bounces high off the arms. It goes really high. It's got a lot of spin on it. That dig has a lot of energy on it. That can be hard for more beginning and even intermediate setters to set really accurately and with control. But those tips and rolls, they tend to bounce off the arms a little easier. They don't have a lot of energy. They're easier to set. Therefore, they're easier to score. And then, like I said, that third situation kind of for our kind of intermediate high school level teams is those balls hit to zone 6. We can dig them with control. We can set out them with control. And then as we get to a higher level team, the things that we want to also add is our ability to transition off of block touches. We look at the women's NCAA, for example, women's or men's NCAA, we're looking at half of attacks that are going to be touched by the block. So some of them are going to be stuffed, some of them are going to be tools, and a fair amount are going to be controlled to one team or the other. So this is both us covering our hitter and also us getting a slowdown that we can then turn into. So one of the most important things with that is that we get those balls high, so we give our teams opportunities to transition. And these opportunities, all of these that I've said, these are really good to have something besides just a high left side ball. We know our outside is going to take a lot of swings. They're probably going to lead us in attempts, especially at the juniors level. And we know a lot of those sets are just going to have to be high balls thrown out to the left side. But let's have the opportunity to have some other options and look for when those options are. So one of those options is a setter dumping the ball. So a lot of times, when do our setters dump? When the other setter just dumped, and now your setter remembers that she can dump, so she's going to dump the immediate next ball. Okay, now. So what we want to do is, hey, when are some good opportunities to set it up? And some of that's going to have to be you identifying your setter strength and weaknesses. You know, which of those tools that she has in her toolkit. But looking for some of those opportunities. Looking for opportunities to run your middle in transition. Yeah, free ball. Okay, that's the first one. But then are there some other situations? I'll give you a good example. When the other team sets a right side and they tip or roll, because tip or roll is a slower ball, right, than a hard hit ball right past the block. And your middle, when they're blocking the right side, they are now coming down and going left to right. So they're going usually back towards a setter. It's a hard transition from the middle when they block the other team's outside. So now they're coming back the other way. But when they're blocking against the right side, and especially if it's tip or roll, and especially if you play your libero in left back, because if you play your libero in zone 5, a lot of tips and rolls, they're going to get those balls. So that's theoretically your best ball control player. So that's kind of something for even high school level teams that I start really emphasizing. Hey, as a libero, one of your jobs is to identify those situations and dig for the middle to kill in transition, and your setter also knowing those. So those are good times. And if you start having a higher level team, or you're coaching boys volleyball, knowing your opportunities to run a pipe in transition, because we know that pipe attacking is effective when you keep it fast and it's relatively straight up and down. When pipes have to go from right on the net to back off the net at the pipe hitter, that can cause, especially for our high school guys, boys and girls, that can cause a lot of hitting errors because the set's traveling back at them and then they tend to punch those balls out of bounds. But when the setter is setting from about 8 feet, relatively in the center of the court, that straight up and down ball, it's not quite like hitting a 2 ball on the net, but those are pretty easy balls to hit. Even for high school kids, a lot of times they can hit those. So knowing that's when we want to set the pipe, not when the ball is tight to the net over in zone 2. That's not when we want to set the pipe. Okay, then you're just jamming right at them. But kind of knowing between our setters and pipe hitters, hey, here's some of these situations where actually this pipe is going to be an easy ball for you to hit, and it may even be an easier ball for you to hit than that left side who's scrambling to get back out there. So hit a couple of these most common causes of transition errors are your setter making a false move. So, for example, you have a back row setter, they start bolting to the net, and then they have to run back off the net and change direction. They have a crappy bump set. Or sometimes the reverse can happen. You have a front row setter, and they land from their block, and they see the ball's getting dug over by the left back. For some reason, they just want to charge at that left back digger, and the ball gets dug back over their head, and then your setter is scrambling for it. So setters making false moves. So what I like to do is setters see the dig and then make your move. A lot of times setters have more time than they think if they just see the dig properly and they take efficient footwork. Sometimes they're in a hurry to move and they're really moving nowhere. So false moves, false setter moves are a huge common cause of transition errors. And then setting the ball too tight and not transitioning deep enough. So those can sometimes be a cumulative factor. The hitters don't get off enough, setters start setting tighter and tighter, and we're all jammed in the net, we're getting blocked, we're going in the net, we're hitting the ball in the net, or we're trying to avoid the net, and then we tip it out of bounds. All those kind of things happen. So when we can get our setters to calm down, make good moves, keep those kind of balls that are harder, keep them high and off the net, being a little conservative, identifying when the chances you have to be a little bit more aggressive because you have a little bit more control. Those are some of your most effective ways to be good in transition. And yeah, so a couple of these have already hit. That big set hit, that kind of ball center ball hitter where you have a little bit of a defensive script. So sometimes it might be you just want that script to be slightly easier attack, so you have opportunities to convert. I like something called, and we talked about the kind of that transition wash. Okay, we talked about it for fours, just alternating the transitions. You can do that for sixes. Most people here, I think, are pretty comfortable. You have a variety. This is the gold medal session, right? So some of you hopefully have heard some semblance of drills in transition. We don't need to dissect those too much. One that I like is just called lemonade. And it's because what I'm going to do is as a coach, I'm going to be on the defensive side. So we kind of need two coaches for this. Or your players, if they have the ability to have some control as they get a little older. But basically, you've got coach on one side or another player. They're going to maybe get set an outside ball. But really, they're just doing it to hit over the net with control because we're going to go block and we're going to be on defense. But you're going to hit to me as the coach. I'm going to take the first digging touch. And hey, I'm old and slow and not that good at volleyball. So I'm going to dig you a lemon. And then you got to make lemonade out of it. So that's why we call it that one. And so I'm just going to kind of alternate through. Sometimes I'll take the first touch for the right back, sometimes for the middle back, sometimes for the left back. And what I actually like to do is I like to be about 50-50 between kind of a crappy dig and a good dig. Because sometimes we do all crappy digs and your players just turn into ball chasers and they're going to get those balls up and over, but they usually don't convert it into a good attack. So I like to be about 50-50. Sometimes we're going to dig this ball nice and controlled. And then we're looking to go and score that ball in transition. And sometimes I'm going to dig kind of a crappier ball and you just got to turn down and keep that ball alive. So we kind of touched on some of these, so I want to kind of skip through this a little bit faster because what I really just want us to kind of talk about a bunch of this in-system stuff. I just kind of want to talk about this idea, I'll talk about the red zone here, but just kind of this idea of kind of a green, yellow, red light. And these are sort of vague. It's going to be different for different teams. If you were a 12 and under team, your in system might be like one tiny little dot on a perfect pass right on that map. Okay, you don't have all that green. You got one little tiny dot of green, maybe at 12 and unders. And maybe if you're coaching the Olympic team, your green zone's a little bit bigger. But every team, they have zones of the court where they can really run their offense. And then they have zones of the court. And basically, it's not just where the ball is passed or dug to. It's also like, is your setter ready or your hitter? Okay, so, but just to kind of make it a little easier graphic. So every team has some green zones, and then every team has areas of the court where they're kind of outside the green zone. And then also, every team has red zones. Even the best teams in the country, even the best teams in the world, even professional teams, even Olympic teams, if we really try to go for the kill, we're more likely to make an error and score the point. And then you kind of have that yellow light in between. And it's not just about where the ball is dug, because sometimes your setter or non-setter is going to turn that sort of borderline ball into a ball that your hitter can go for the kill. And sometimes you're thinking you have a good chance to get a kill and they kind of set up a stinker, and then you got to just manage it. So, but just kind of having that concept of kind of red light, green light, and you kind of have those yellow zones in between, and teaching your players to kind of understand that. There's nothing wrong with you kind of know you're in a red zone. You try to get up there. Hey, probably can't get the kill directly on this one, but how can I still make it a little challenging for the other team? Okay, what do I have between my hardest swing where I'm purely going for a kill and giving the other team kind of a free ball, down ball? When you give free balls, where do you want to put the free balls? Hopefully not right to zone 6. Okay, hopefully you have some other ones, maybe deep to a corner. I love a short free ball to zone 2-3. That's my preferred for a free ball, but without making errors. So you gotta manage your risk there. Down balls. I only like a down ball to zone 1. If you can't hit the down ball over to zone 1, I'd rather see you just set it over short. We're jumping and attacking, but do we have some other tools in our toolkit besides a full rip? Do we know where to tip the ball? Does your team know where to tip the ball against a rotation defense versus a perimeter defense? Because if you tip right over the block against a rotation defense, you're handing the ball to that defender. So against a rotation defense, you got to push the tips more into shallow 6 or more over to kind of zone 3-4. But if they're playing, if their off blockers coming under, then the tip towards the line is better. So just kind of understanding that. And look, hey, you may not be coaching that at 12 and under. 12 and under might be more, hey, just try to push the ball to the deep corner. That's fine. But just kind of understanding at your level for your team, what your players are capable of, and the type of defenses that you're seeing. Hey, what should we do when we don't have a full swing? What tools do we have in our toolkit? And so there's a little bit of the knowledge aspect of the game, and then there's having some chances to practice that. Okay, we can practice a little bit of our hand contact work, practice some of our pushes, some of our rolls. But just starting with that concept, I mean, this kind of red zone toolkits could be a whole seminar in and of itself. Might be the next one we need to schedule. But just kind of bringing that idea up with your players and start talking about that. Hey, were we in system there? Were we red zone there? Or hey, were we kind of in between where we can work for just a good swing to the core?